How you doing? I kind of took the week off last week, sort of. So I'm back this week, and I'm late. I realized this week too, but I was off earlier in the week with New Year's and everything. So you're getting the Epiphany version of First Look right now. And I don't have every light on in the sanctuary. Maybe I should put all the lights on. But anyway, obviously here and trying to get myself back into work mode, which I find harder to do than anything. Being off for a few days and then coming back and trying to recalibrate and get yourself sort of back into the swing of things. I always find that extraordinarily hard. But that is what today is. And so I'm glad to be doing it with you and talking about Epiphany, talking about one of those things that ends one season into a next, because we're still in the midst of Christmas, the Christmas season, and that we get to hear. And actually, I'm going by the wise men. So, every time we get here, I think there's an interesting kind of fatigue that sets in. So on one end of it, December kind of brings its own fatigue, right? We get up for Christmas parties and Christmas gatherings and Christmas baking and Christmas shopping, and then there's the actual Jesus parts of all of that, and we get to Christmas services and all those kind of things that we do, and and then you get through it. It's you hope it's joyous and fun and all the things that you hope it is, but it's also a lot to get through. And if you're like me, because Christmas feels, well, it is something that I'm helping to create for the people around me, which means some work. You get to the day after Christmas and you're just sort of, you take a breath, and then, and there's Sunday after Christmas, and so you ramp back up for that. And then this year at least, we get through that season, and then it's New Year's. And New Year's has this kind of interesting, element to it for all of us, I think. Realizing, of course, that there's something very artificial about it. December 31st and January 1st being a new year, and what does that mean? And it's not like this is God mandated that we, we're supposed to start our years when Jesus was born, and then we start our years on this arbitrary date in December. None of that really means anything from a larger cosmic kind of sense. And yet, it's sort of a time that we mark to begin again. And, as we think about the birth of Jesus and we think about, what that means for the world, some of that makes some sense. That you need a time of reset and a time of reflection and a time to kind of get ready for whatever's next, whatever happens to be coming next. And, we celebrate that, one after the other. But of course, the Magi probably didn't show up to Jesus for a while. And so we tell the story a little bit out of place. But that story of wisdom sort of meeting up with Jesus, and that the wisdom comes from other faith traditions in another part of the world, I think is really wonderful, and really, I think, only adds to the message that we hope that people get from following Jesus. The kind of way that Jesus finds a way of pulling people in, caring for people, caring about a world much bigger than the one that we create and we know. It's something more than that. So I'm going to read a little bit of the story, just because I think you know it pretty well, but I'm going to at least reference it. This is Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. And it's, so I'm going to start with verse 7, but it's 1 through 12, so if you want to read it. But that's where I wanted to focus for, at least for today. Then Herod secretly called the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary and his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left their own country by another road. And then after that passage, of course, comes really hard things. And for whatever reason, we don't read them as much. Jesus escapes to Egypt, and then Herod kills all of the young children and infants in that place trying to find Jesus. And then eventually it says that Herod dies and they return from Egypt. And that's when it pivots from the infant story or the young Jesus story into the adult, John the Baptist and that kind of thing. And I think, I've read this story as many times as you have. And over and over again, I'm struck by a couple of different things. One, that there's this humongous difference between wisdom and power. And I think that we often equate the two. Well, Herod must have been this way or that way, and that must have been true because he was in those positions. And yet in this story, it's obvious that this is someone who has no good intentions for anyone but himself. And then you see these magi that we have put our full kind of trust in as those who see the true Jesus, who understand God more intimately than Herod does, and can kind of show us the way as well. They're following the star, they're following the guidance of God, and we want to be like that. And they bring gifts that they think would make sense for a king, but of course this king can't really do anything with them yet. And if they would have known, even as they were trying to be, wise and thoughtful and, look at the circumstance the way that it is, they would have given them things that would have prepared them more for their journey. If it's interesting that the star can lead them to a place, but doesn't give them all the information that they need in order to be there, that they would have to glean that for themselves based on what was happening. And, I think that that's a good kind of working definition of wisdom, in and of itself. you can do all the planning and all the work and try to understand, what's happening and put forethought and, use every bit of knowledge and everything that you have and know into something. But you're still going to be reactive. You're still going to change based on circumstances. That things, won't, not everything is going to go the way that you hope or think that it will go. And so part of wisdom is being adaptive, reactive to, what's in front of you, and then, finding another way out, finding another way home, which is what they do. And I think so much of the way that we live and so much of the way that we understand the world is like that. And I like that that's a part of the story. I also appreciate, even though it's not part of what we read for today, I also appreciate the fact that the story includes these parts of the life of young Jesus that aren't easy. And in fact, for Mary and Joseph, I'm sure were traumatic. The kind of wake of disaster that is behind them, and then escaping to Egypt for a time. I'm sure they look back on those years, and it was a sort of blend of, we remember Jesus and being young and his first steps and first words and, that type of thing. But all of that happened under these circumstances that were hard. We were living in a place we didn't know, and we were around people who didn't necessarily speak the language that we speak. And we were trying to make it in this place where, we were foreign. And we knew that behind us, a lot of people had a really rough time of it, and they had their own trauma and awfulness, and that's what was left behind us. And we had to leave that place in order to be safe. And that's all a part of the story. And it leaves you with as many questions as it does answers. Well, why didn't the wise men do this? Or why didn't this happen? Or why didn't that happen? And those are all legitimate questions. Why does God do this? Why does God allow this to happen? Why is the world the way that it is? And I think that we deal with injustice the way that we do because we assume that there's a bigger story. There's a bigger kind of arc to it, that even if things aren't right now, aren't the way they're supposed to be now, eventually they will be. And I think our sense of goodness and our sense of faith, allows us to think that and to feel that and to plan that way, to live that way. And, maybe that's why the Magi do what they do. It's not our place to intervene. But I don't always know exactly what I'm supposed to glean from this story. There's something to it that kind of feels like, well, they give Jesus gifts, and that kind of makes me think of Christmas. It's beautiful, and, it kind of points to the transcendent element of Jesus, that he's not just this child born in Palestine, but there's this, it's his life and birth is rooted in something that goes far beyond our own experience and transcends that. But then you see the tragedy surrounding what happens, and it's startling. But I think the blend of those things is as real to our experience as anything is. I've shared this with you before, but if you go to Bethlehem now and you stand there outside of I can't remember the church of maybe it's the Church of the Nativity, the one that houses where supposedly Jesus was born. There's that church that's standing there, and it's large and beautiful and all the things you'd expect, and then there's a courtyard. So there's the church on one side, and then there's the courtyard, and then beyond that courtyard is a mosque. And so you can be standing there, and there's the church on one side of you and a mosque on the other side of you, and then in between there's a Starbucks, which is as interesting and true kind of element to all of it as I can think of. The fact that it's Starbucks, and we're talking about a star and Epiphany and that kind of thing, maybe there's something in there that I am not smart enough to think through, but the modern reality of that story, I think, is fascinating, especially given what's going on in Palestine and Gaza and Israel right now, because that's messy and horrible and complicated and long-standing and has all sorts of elements to it that are heartbreaking and cruel and kind of makes you shake your head and not know what to do, and things that have there's moments of bravery and compassion and selflessness that come out of those stories, but it's it's a mix of things, right? It's all of that. The story of Jesus is all of those things. These foreign magi, maybe they were thought of as magic men, or maybe they were just thought of as philosophers, or whatever you could call them. They're as much a part of the story as the shepherds are. And all of these players in this story make up what this is to us. And for as messy as it is, both then and now, I think the part of it that I like is the fact that it's all in there. It's not, we might only read the parts that fit conveniently into the story that we want to tell, but all of those parts are in there. Herod is still in there, and the danger is still in there, and the fleeing and the death and the refugee status and the returning and the poverty, is all still in there. And we can choose to skip by it if we want, or we can try to deal with it. And that's the part of the story that I really admire. That's all in there. Because that's true for us also. We start a new year, but the problems of our old year don't just automatically go away. Whatever you were dealing with from a health standpoint or a relationship standpoint or an economic standpoint, personality standpoint, mental status standpoint, all those things are still there. And you may have resolved to do something new, and that's wonderful. You may have decided that this is the year that you do something else, or you try something else, or you stop doing something. This is the year that you're going to reinvest in a person or a thing or an activity or a practice. And that's a wonderful thing, and I hope it works. But I think often the hardest thing is trying to figure out, how do I jump in, and as many times as I wish and hope that there's a new start, what do I do when all I can really do is just keep going? Find little starts and stops along the way, but just, do my best to try to make my way in the reality as I know it. Because it's not always ideal, and it's not always magical, and it doesn't always work out the way I want it to work out. But along the way, there are also those sort of magi wise moments that I can learn from, and I can grow from, and I can try to reflect as much love as I can. So, Epiphany means all those things. The last thing I wanted to mention, just as I'm thinking about it, part of the reason I'm here is to make sure that everything's kind of the way it needs to be for Sunday. And one of the things I've started doing for Epiphany is certainly not my idea, but is one that I'm just using because it's very common for other people that I know in ministry. And that's the use of something called star words, not Star Wars, star words. And a star word is very, very simple. It's a meditative practice. And at the end of the service, you'll be given a little card, and on it is a word to focus on. It could be hope, or it could be humility, or it could be wisdom, or it could be strength, or whatever it happens to be. And it's not predictive of anything. It's just a quiet moment of focus. It's like one little thing to try to center you on. How can I incorporate this idea into my year, with hope of it kind of being a kind of spiritual practice? And I put mine somewhere where I'll see it. It's downstairs in my house. And I see it every, once or twice a day, and I, just sort of glance at it and keep going. But, it's just a way to be tethered by something. So you don't get to choose your word. You just reach into a basket and pull one out, or it's handed to you, and that's your word for the year. And sometimes it's a word where you think, oh, that sounds great. That's a perfect thing for me to be focused on this year. It's something I was already thinking about. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's one of those things like, I don't know what to do with this word or this idea. It doesn't seem to match me at all. Or sometimes nothing really comes to mind exactly in terms of what that will be, but it sort of allows you to expand your imagination. So that's something that we'll be doing this Sunday. And if you're not able to join us this Sunday in person, let me know, and I can either pull one out for you and, send it to you, or I can save one for you, or, you can get one next week or whatever. But that's something that we're also going to be doing here on Epiphany. And it's a Communion Sunday as well. Well, that's about all I have for you. You don't have as many days to contemplate between now and Sunday as you normally would, me doing this on a Thursday instead of on a Monday. But I hope that you're either able to rally from that and do the best you can. Well, thank you for joining me on this. Thanks for being a part of what we do here. Happy New Year, and I'll see you next time for another First Look. So take care.